This episode of Q Point Podcast is pre-recorded, produced and sponsored by Corenna and Quirk, broker at Next Home Experience.
Different views.
I know your story.
From different Q's.
Incredible job.
He's David Quirk.
You brought it up.
And she's Corenna Quirk.
Imagine.
This is
Q Point.
Joining us now in studio is Maine Secretary of State and Democratic gubernatorial candidate Shenna Bellows. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be on your show. You guys are terrific.
Thank you. We do appreciate it.
When people hear that ballots showed up in an Amazon delivery, it raised some concern about the chain of custody. Where does that situation stand now?
That investigation has been turned over to the Office of the Attorney General, and I'm really proud of law enforcement and of Mainers. We saw record turnout in 2025 for a referendum election, and the voters spoke very clearly around question 1 that they support Maine's strong election laws, that we have safe and secure elections, and they don't want to see changes. I will say that UPS really fell down on the job. We isolated the problem, right? It happened at UPS. We know that the printer, a Maine-based printer, shipped those ballots out marked appropriately. And the clerks did their job. When the Ellsworth clerk received a damaged box and it was missing 250 ballots, the clerks are supposed to sign for the ballots and verify that they're getting everything that they're expecting. She immediately called our office and said, we have a problem. So we knew with less than 24 hours that there was a problem. It was isolated. And I will say the checks and balances in the system also worked because remember, even if it wasn't a good Samaritan who turned those ballots over to their clerk, if it had been some nefarious actor who tried to take those 250 ballots and stuff them in a ballot drop box or do something like that, they wouldn't have been able to do so because under Maine law, every absentee ballot has to be in a marked envelope from the clerk, has to be filled out, and has to match a request from the voter and gets verified in a very public process. None of those ballots get counted in secret. It's always out front with both major political parties present. So what we saw was 2 things. While the carrier fell down on the job, and that's why we switched carriers, we went to vital delivery for election day ballots and are moving forward with a different carrier in the future. We did see the checks and balances in the system hold, and we saw one of our most successful referendum elections ever. And that's a testament to all of the hardworking people involved in the process. We have some of the best staff in the nation.
For those ballots to count, they would need the 250 envelopes too, am I right?
That's right. And they would have had to falsify 250 requests from registered voters. Remember, one of the innovations that we have, and I'm really proud of the modernization we have done in elections and at the BMV, and one of the innovations is the online absentee ballot tracking request system that creates a lot of transparency. So when a voter requests an absentee ballot, the clerk is marking that in the central voter registration system, and that request is posted online. The Secretary of State's office publishes information about all of the requests in the state. So the parties can watch and they can see, oh, the Quirks have requested their absentee ballot. The voter can also see in that system, okay, my request has been accepted. My ballot's been mailed to me. They can see if they haven't gotten it yet, that there's a problem. They can alert the clerk to it. When they return their ballot, they can see when the ballot is accepted by the clerk as well as having been received. Similarly, any person in Maine can look at that absentee voter data and see who's requesting absentee ballots and who's returning absentee ballots. So that's just another safeguard in the process.
Is that how they caught the gentleman from Herman who voted under his uncle's name who passed away before the ballot was issued?
That's a great example. If you vote twice in Maine, you will be caught. And you will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law because every single voter is being tracked in the central voter registration system. Those clerks are checking that system, the parties are checking that system, and the Secretary of State's office is checking that system and looking for potential duplicates so that those can immediately get investigated by law enforcement and then referred to the Office of the Attorney General for prosecution.
Is it true that somewhere you stated, maybe on a podcast or elsewhere, that non-citizens, there may have been a few that have indeed voted in the past?
No. And this is where those internet clips that go viral get taken out of context, doctored to tell a lie. And it is a lie. There are not non-citizens voting in Maine. You have to be a citizen to vote in Maine. And the clerks do a really good job with the voter registration process. You have to show proof of identity and proof of residency. So again, this was part of the disinformation campaign that fed into question 1 in an argument that somehow Maine election laws weren't strong enough. And the voters voted overwhelmingly, 64%, that in fact, Maine law is strong. We do have safe and secure elections. And under the Constitution and under the law, only citizens are voting in our state.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, states are required under the National Voter Registration Act, NVRA, to maintain voter registration lists. What safeguards does Maine do to ensure that eligible voters are not mistakenly removed during that process?
I'm really proud of the work that we have done under the National Voter Registration Act to keep our voter list clean. When I came on board as secretary, this was something that I heard from the clerks. When students who attend school, they're allowed to vote in Maine, right? But then they move and their names need to come off the list. Or if people move out of state. So we did a couple of things. One, we joined an interstate compact called the Electronic Registration Information Center. It's an exchange of data between the states, and it's run by the states only. There are no third parties involved. But we exchange information so that we can see if you move to Florida and you're voting in Florida, we can take you off the roll. So that's happening. And then the other thing is this mailer that we have been doing. Under the law, if a voter hasn't voted in 2 subsequent federal elections, so that would be like a presidential or a congressional election, at that point, we send them a postcard. It's called an NVRA postcard. It's confirming that they still want to be a registered voter. If that comes back undeliverable, then we temporarily make that voter inactive. We wait one more federal election. And then if they don't vote or sign a petition, then we know they really probably aren't a voter and we cancel that record. We, about a year ago, canceled approximately 200,000 records from people that had not voted in the 2020 election and the subsequent federal election. I think that was really important because that's people that had moved, people that were no longer in the state or no longer wanted to be registered to vote. We just did that again. We just sent out another big mailing for people who had not participated in the 2022 or 2024 elections. And we will then wait for the 2026 election. They'll be made inactive, but they can just make themselves active by voting or signing a petition. But if they don't vote in 2026, that's probably a good indicator that they're not a voter in Maine anymore. We remove them from the list. That is a process that all states do to keep our voter list clean. But it's one that I really kicked into gear in a big way when I became secretary, because I do think it's in all of our interest to have the most accurate, up-to-date voter lists.
So how's the Real ID coming?
The good news is traffic at the branches has slowed, so you can make an appointment and go and get your Real ID. About 40% of Mainers now have their Real ID, which is pretty remarkable. It's been a huge year for us. We've had record traffic in all of the branches across the state. But again, it's coming back down to normal. And there's still wait times if you don't make that appointment. But my team is really efficient. They're working really hard. They're really customer focused. I will say, unfortunately, the federal government, and this is absurd. I don't understand why they did this, but they are now charging $45 if you don't have the Real ID. So if you didn't get the Real ID because you thought, oh my goodness, $55 for a license or an ID is too much, and you were trying to be frugal, well, this is your moment to save money next time you fly by getting that Real ID, unless you already have a passport or a military ID or other federal form of identification that the federal government will accept. Because unfortunately, our hands are tied. I'm not a big fan of the Real ID. I don't think the federal government should be in our business. But the reality is they do control who flies. So at the BMV, we've made the best of a bad situation and done our best to serve the customers. And I'm really excited about this. In November, we launched online renewal of the Real ID. So for those early birds who got their Real ID years ago and they're coming up on their renewal and they don't want to go to the branch, well, you don't have to anymore. It's one of our many online services. You can renew your registration online. You can renew your Real ID now online as well. And this is also very exciting. We are soon to launch a mobile unit. We are going to have a BMV in a truck. We'll be able to drive it pivot, whether it's to Belfast or Dover Foxcroft or a veteran's home or a senior living facility, and we'll be able to open the doors and serve people right in that vehicle. So it looks just like a little mini branch. It's outfitted with all of the abilities that they have at the branch to do the same transactions. So we are bringing the BMV to you coming soon.
Wow.
That's fantastic. Will the focus be going to the rural parts of Maine where people may not be able to get out?
It's exactly that. Piscataquis County doesn't have a branch. We hear it from folks in Greenville and Dover Foxcroft and beyond all of the time. It just takes so long to get to Bangor. Bangor is one of our busiest branches. Similarly, we hear complaints from Washington County. We have one in Calais, but if you're in Machias, that is a trek. Similarly, in Waldo County and Belfast is about an hour from all of our branches. So those are going to be some of the areas that we're going to focus on. We'll be going up to the county, of course, as well, because again, we have one branch in Caribou, but no services currently in Holton. So it'd be nice to expand there. So this mobile unit's going to be busy. And if it's successful, hopefully the legislature and the next governor will see fit to fund a couple more, because I think this model of service, the idea that we come to you and go out on the road, and to have it outfitted just like a mini branch. It's not equipment that you have to lug and set up and take down. It's just open the doors and we're ready for business.
Do you think it would be a year-round event, or will it be just the summer months?
It will be year-round.
Wow.
So it's really luxurious. It's heated and cooling inside that truck. So
that's great.
We're excited about it.
Obviously, I've been watching some of the bills, and the one that I'm hoping it gets done and passed quickly is electronic titles. Where are we at on that?
I couldn't agree more. We are hoping within the next year. So we already, of course, have the electronic lien option for the lenders. And that's been a big deal because remember, when I came on board as Secretary of State, if you were trying to sell a car, and you sell a lot of them, and you needed to get that title from TD Bank North, maybe from a warehouse, because everything was paper, that could take weeks or months. And we had some tremendous backlogs when I first started as secretary that we've been able to really reduce. Now that we've got this electronic lien solution for the lenders, we can just get that document from the lenders electronically. But the next step is the dealers. We want to create a solution for car dealers that is an electronic title, then to the consumers, because the customer expects that you can do business on your phone. Our kids and grandkids are not keeping track of papers. They want documents that are electronic. And it really does improve efficiency and cut costs. And I think when we think about making government work for the people, making the Bureau of Motor Vehicles more customer focused, it's also about improving efficiency and reducing taxpayer spending on our services.
What remains the biggest unresolved challenge for BMV modernization?
We are modernizing using largely in-house resources. We had a choice at the very beginning: spend tens of millions of dollars to outsource it all, hire a big company to do it for us, or create a predictable budget, bring programmers on site to work with our experts in licensed services, in registrations, in titles, and build those solutions in-house at a more affordable rate. So we've been doing it in-house, which is really exciting. The challenge with that is it makes it just a little bit slower than if we were spending more money and going out to one of those larger companies. And I do think it's a partnership with the legislature. I feel truly grateful as Secretary of State that we've had unanimous support in the legislature. I want to give a shout out to the Transportation Committee, unanimous support in the Transportation Committee for modernization. They have not blinked when it comes to thinking about how do we better serve our customers. And then, of course, there are always things that come up, things that the federal government throws at you. I mean, who knew that finally, after 20 years, they were actually going to enforce Real ID? Well, they did, and we had to adjust and adapt to that. And we've seen other federal mandates when it comes to CDL licensing. We've seen a lot of federal mandates come down the pike over the last couple of years that had not been expected. Our staff has been really nimble in adapting to what's coming at us, but also trying to keep the eye on the ball for how do we do what we do better to serve Mainers better.
You are listening to Q Point Podcast. I'm Corenna Quirk, co-hosting with my husband, David Quirk, and we are having a conversation with Maine Secretary of State and Democratic gubernatorial candidate, Shenna Bellows. You paused new confidential license plates for federal agencies during immigration enforcement concerns. Where does that stand now?
We paused confidential license plates because there should not be secret police in a democracy. Hopefully you're never speeding down the highway. But if you were doing something wrong and you were pulled over, whether it's by Bangor PD or state police or the Penobscot County Sheriff, their license plates would be marked as law enforcement. You would know who it was pulling you over. And that's a really important principle in a free society, that if you're getting detained, if you're getting arrested, if you're having that interaction with law enforcement, that there's somewhere to hold that agency accountable if they violate your rights. And that you know that it's legit, that it's not some random person trying to snatch you off the street. So with ICE, when they asked for undercover plates, I had real concerns about that, particularly given what we had seen in Minnesota. And in fact, the concerns that I had were borne out by what we saw in Maine, which was people getting seized off the street and arrested, many of them without a criminal record. So we have an undercover license plate program that is really important to law enforcement who are involved in trying to disrupt drug trafficking or human trafficking rings, who are doing undercover operations where that gathering of information and evidence is crucial to building a case, to holding criminals accountable and keeping our communities safe. That is different from an operation where officers are stopping cars or knocking on doors to effectuate an arrest. We have resumed the undercover plate program for federal agencies, but they must sign and attest that they are not going to use the undercover plate for civil immigration enforcement.
So just to clarify, you have now resumed confidential license plates?
We've resumed confidential license plates for federal agencies. We never stopped for state and local. There is now a form that the federal agencies must attest that they're not going to be using those plates for civil immigration enforcement.
So what's going to be on the ballot this November besides the candidates?
The breaking news is that there will be a citizen initiative, an act to designate school sports participation and facilities by sex on the ballot this November, most likely. What's happened is my office did, in fact, validate petitions for that referendum, finding that they had 71,033 valid signatures, which is more than the required roughly 67,000. It goes now to the legislature. The legislature could pass it. They could propose an alternative, or they can send it out to the voters with no changes. So they have an opportunity to have a hearing and explore the merits of the initiative, but most likely this will go to the ballot in November. Of course, the opponents of the referendum have an opportunity to challenge our findings that the signatures are valid. They have about a week's time to review the petitions and see if there's anything that our office missed that would invalidate it. Once it comes back from the legislature, either going out to the people or with alternatives, then it is my job to write the question for the ballot. And then proponents and opponents of the question have an opportunity. They have 30 days to weigh in. They can suggest wording. In fact, any Maine voter can suggest how they think the question should be worded during that 30-day period. By law, I have to read all of those suggestions. It's actually a lot of fun to read people's ideas for how the question should be worded. And then I issue a final question. If the opponents or the proponents don't like it, they can sue me. That would go to the Maine Supreme Court and would either get upheld or direct me to rewrite it. And then it goes to the ballot next November. So it's a really interesting process. The fact that the public gets to weigh in on the question itself, the fact that the Citizens Initiative is based on public signatures. But that will be so far the only referendum question. The legislature, of course, can initiate referendum questions. They have not yet. Oftentimes, they will send out a bond to the voters. We haven't seen that yet, but it's possible that they would do so, or that there may be another initiative that they want to see go to a vote.
So when you decide on the actual final question, the wording, is there a committee or is it solely up to you?
The Constitution delegates the authority to me. I always, as a practice, pull together folks from the Office of the Attorney General who are experienced in the legal analysis, and from the Elections Division who has so much experience with ballot measures and voter education. So I generally pull together a small group, but the ultimate responsibility for the question is mine.
Speaking of signatures, so you just had a referendum, and now you have the candidates bringing in all their signatures. Do you have a system for that?
Maine does it very carefully by hand. So the elections division at the Secretary of State's office, which is run by the civil service, we have the longest serving elections director in the country, Julie Flynn. She's been doing this for over 32 years. She served under many secretaries of state, from Bill Diamond to Dan Gwiatkowski, Republican Charlie Summers, Matt Dunlap to myself. They actually look at the petitions line by line, reviewing every aspect of those petitions, both for candidates and for ballot questions. Now, I have isolated myself from any review of candidate petitions, especially when it comes to the governor's race. There are checks and balances in the system to prevent conflicts of interest. And it's that civil service staff, the non-political, non-partisan staff, who are going to be overseeing every aspect of the elections when it comes to the governor's race this year.
So what is the status of returning the production of license plates back to the Maine State Prison?
We're almost on the 1-year anniversary of the new license plate. So you still see some chickadees out on the road. That's for people whose registration expired in March or April or May. By the end of May, so first week in June, anybody with a chickadee, that's a recipe for trouble, because that means they didn't renew their registration and they're out of compliance. So that new plate issuance, which was, if you think about it, over 1 million pairs of plates, well over 2 million license plates, those were produced by Waldale. That's the Canadian company that bid on the contract. 3M is the supplier of the actual license plate finish, which is kind of interesting. They're an American-based company, and the aluminum actually comes from the United States. But that contract, in terms of the new issuance, their responsibilities will come to a close in that area. All along, we've been issuing those specialty plates. So we've had some people be like, no, I want the lobster, or I want the sportsman's plate is a real popular one, the breast cancer plate. Those have been produced at the Maine State Prison all along, and they will continue to operate. Now, we had made the point to the legislature that there's some real facilities challenges with both the building where they do the license plates as well as the machines. Mainers are frugal people. We were using some very outdated machines to produce the license plate. In fact, when I was testifying before the legislature, the oven was down. It had been down for a couple of weeks. I really applaud the Department of Corrections staff. They are resourceful and they're good at fixing the machines. They're good at propping up that building. So we'll continue to do the manufacture there. There are going to need to be some structure improvements. We are going to need to modernize that equipment at some point. Right now, we keep patching it up and fixing it up, and we keep limping along. At some point, there's going to be equipment failure, and we're going to have to do something about it. We had proposed that maybe the state get out of the business of license plates, and the legislature felt that the tradition of doing it at the Department of Corrections, creating a job opportunity for folks who are incarcerated there, was something that they wanted to continue, and we follow all the laws.
So how's the big birthday party coming?
There's so many exciting things that are happening around the state. We have some great history in this state, and it's America's 250th birthday, July 4th. I know Bangor will do a big celebration. They always do. And one of the really exciting things, Maine Historical Society has one of the original Declarations of Independence, and it's called the Dunlap Broadside. It was one of the printed copies that they sent out. And remember, back when they declared independence 250 years ago on July 4th, they sent those Declarations of Independence out to churches all across the country. Maine Historical Society is going to put the Declaration of Independence on the road. There's going to be a tour where you can see one of the originals. It's going to be here at Bangor Library. It's going to be in all 16 counties across the summer. And I have to say, I went down to Washington for a meeting with secretaries of state from all parties, from all states, and we had a behind-the-scenes tour of National Archives, and we got to see the original Declaration of Independence signed by the founders. We got to see the original Constitution. And it just gave me chills. This is what brings our country together. It doesn't matter whether you're a Republican, an independent, a Democrat. Those beliefs, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and women too, right?
That's right.
But the idea of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the idea of freedom that makes us fundamentally American. We're in a really divided time, but there are areas where we come together. We come together to run our elections. You might have different perspectives about who should win and who should lose, but on election day, you see Republican poll workers and Democratic poll workers making it work. And with America's birthday, with these historical commemorations, these events that are happening in every county of the state, the historical societies aren't asking for your political membership card at the door. It's people coming together to celebrate local history. And Maine is a big piece of that. Of course, we were part of Massachusetts back then, but we were huge participants in the Revolutionary War. In fact, remember the British attacks here in Maine, the first naval battle off of Washington County, the attacks on Portland that are named in the Declaration of Independence, the cannonballs and the burning of Portland is part of the grievances that the colonists were citing and why they wanted to separate from the king. So it was taxes, but it was also an assault on our sovereignty as colonies at the time. I think that history is really important. I think it's a really important moment in our history to think about who we are as a nation and what brings us together, even in these divided times.
Should communities throughout Maine expect to have events?
There are a series of local events, and what we're doing at the state level is we're trying to make sure there's a one-stop shop. You can come to our website, America 250, the Maine Semi-Quincentennial Commission. We have a Facebook page. We have a newsletter you can sign up to get an email into your inbox about what the upcoming events are. And you can check it out because there truly are events all over the state that are going to be happening over the next 6 months. In schools, actually, all year long, the Department of Education has had a mobile education unit focused on America's 250th birthday. There's going to be something called America's Potluck, which is going to be a lot of fun. And it's a real opportunity for community-based commemoration of our history.
Thank you for listening to Part 1 with Maine Secretary of State and Democratic gubernatorial candidate Shenna Bellows. Make sure to tune in tomorrow, Sunday, March 29th at 6:30 a.m. on VOM, The Voice of Maine.
You've been listening to Q Point.
Follow us at qpointpodcast.com or on your favorite streaming app.
This is where you can get the news from the people who make the news.
Make sure to join us next time.
We hope you tune in.
Q Point Podcast invites guests and candidates from all parties to join the conversation. The views, information, opinions, and comments expressed during this program do not necessarily represent those of the host, Q Point Podcast, associates, affiliates, and CQRE LLC.
Thanks for being a part of the conversation. The most important voices aren't always the loudest ones. They're the voices of everyday people, raising families, running businesses, serving their towns. That's who we want to hear from. Share your ideas with us online, and let's make sure those voices are never left out. Find us on Facebook or on X or at qpointpodcast.com. We look forward to hearing from you. Catch every episode at qpointpodcast.com or wherever you stream. Tune in and tell your friends.